Welcome to the first ever episode of BFS BTS. For the uninitiated, that's Breakfast Show Behind the Scenes. Breakfast Show Behind the Scenes, BFS BTS. The basic premise of this show is to bring to your attention some of the stuff that either we have prompted and that has then gained traction after we finished talking about it, or things that are going on social media and in the news that are going on that we haven't yet covered but are of interest. The one that I'm about to bring to you is actually one that covers, it's kind of got a foot in both camps. We've been talking for quite some time about the planned abolition of grandfather rights under the CSCS scheme that is gradually trundling forward and is going to greatly impact people in the industry. So over the weekend, I posted over on LinkedIn a post, and it's gained quite a bit of traction, as it turns out. My post said, I have a follow-up on the abolition of grandfather rights under the CSCS scheme. Excuse me 1 second. Sorry. Presumably, some of those that will need to retake exams in order to secure the relevant competence cards may have literacy issues. Presumably, some may be dyslexic. Presumably, English will not be the first language for some of those impacted. And presumably, for some of those impacted, this may be their first interaction with online applications and computer-based training and testing. Has the CSCS scheme taken all of this into consideration, I wonder? Now, that post, which went out on Sunday afternoon, has now had more than 3,600 impressions, lots and lots of comments. Before I get into the crux of the comments, just one thing, I've done a bit more digging on this. And according to Google, I researched this morning, according to Google, dyslexia apparently affects, to varying degrees, affects 1 in 10 people. The estimate suggests that there are 6 million dyslexic people in the UK. Now, applying that 1 in 10 statistic to the workforce within the construction industry, or those that are currently qualified under CSCS, it is somewhere between, it is claimed to be 70,000 or 200,000, depending who you believe and who you listen to. So that means that there are potentially between 7,000 and 20,000 people who have literacy issues who are now expected to apply online for a new test and a new regime under the CSCS scheme, and then they'll be expected to sit an exam, presumably doing exactly the same thing. So at least part of it is going to be online. Obviously, that's going to have issues, and I wanted to know exactly what those issues were likely to be. So I threw it over to the audience, and the first person that responded was one of the regulars that we have on the Breakfast Show, a guy called Mick Norton, who is a technical author and is also the head of Norton Training and Testing. His comment read, those within the construction sector diagnosed with dyslexia, learning difficulties, and seeking the renewal of their tickets on an NVQ requirement are not receiving the requisite assistance demanded under the Equality Act. He goes on to say, if English is not your first language, you are in deep problems trying to find a provider whose main business aim is not to bleed you dry financially with substandard mentorship and lackluster assessments. Pearson VUE, who control the main health and safety contract with key accredited bodies, charge individual dyslexic candidates £40 for a reader recorder to assist, and additionally charge the accredited body a further £220 for the same service. NVQs for grandfather rights candidates will mean a further dig into the candidates' meagre funds to find at least £1,000 for a vocational award delivered by assessors, often without requisite occupational competence demanded. It's one big gravy train that needs scuppering, says Mick Norton. He goes on to say 1 charge to the candidate and 1 enhanced charge to the accredited body probably does constitute discrimination, because I actually suggested, does the additional charge for dyslexic candidates not constitute discrimination? And Mick is going to have a look at the Equality Act, but it certainly sounds as if that is the case. Now, when we first uncovered this situation with the abolition of grandfather rights under CSCS, I did a video on it, and then a guy called Ollie Guns over at, who is a groundworks contractor, goes by the name Ollie Guns, does some fantastic video work over on YouTube. He did his own video, and then we decided, why don't we just sit down together and do one together? I'll link all of those in the show notes for this episode. But Ollie Guns responded to say it's not the CSCS scheme that have to provide this. They simply state that they want an MVQ for their card scheme. It's down to training providers to coach people through the course to achieve the qualification. Having researched into this for my own requirements, I can say that there is some support from course providers in most of the areas you mentioned, but it varies depending on who you are looking to do your course with. But they all offer support in some form. After all, they want you to pass. These are the hoops we currently have to jump through to stay in the industry. But of course, the goalpost could change again tomorrow. It will be interesting to see how many cars are not renewed as a result of this round of changes, reducing the already stretched labour pool. That's a really valid point. I'm recording this at just before noon on Monday, the 10th of July. A couple of hours ago, I was doing our Breakfast show, and several of the members of the audience, when I was talking about this before, said that they had actually ditched some of the cards, backhoe loader cars and that kind of thing. So rather than holding 5, 6, 7, 8 different cards, because of the cost and because of the complexity of actually renewing those cards, they've whittled down the cards. So while there are still the same number of people employed within the industry, the number of people that are actually qualified to operate the various types of equipment is reducing. It's an important point. It's not just people leaving the industry or abandoning the industry. It's abandoning parts of the industry, which will impact. Mick Norton responded to Ollie Gunn saying CSCS claim there's still 70,000 guys to get through their industry accreditation hoop by December 2024, but they're keeping deathly quiet about the alleged 200,000 professionals who are still refusing to jump through the CSCS CLC bureaucratic hoop, and the CLC obviously is the Construction Leadership Council. More employers should fight the CSCS CLC demands and remind these quangos that the only legal requirement, important point this, the only legal requirement for competence is at the behest of the employer, not a bit of plastic that will be forensically destroyed in any court action challenging its status regarding competence. Paul Burns, who is an operations director at CPJ Education, says Chris Monks has a brilliant option for CPCS workers affected by this. Now let's have a look. Chris Monks goes on to say, thanks, Paul. We are actually only delivering an option that CPCS offer, but for some reason, other providers don't seem to want to offer it. Money, probably the main reason, not enough in it for them. Financially driven much? I do believe so. Mick Norton responds, Chris Monks, I was invited to sit the new health and safety test hosted by a major card scheme, and I was suitably impressed with what they're trying to achieve with a new product, and delighted to say I passed. Why should the plant operator of 2023 have to research the contents of a 220 plus page health and safety study booklet sold by the CITB and which competes with the Old Testament in bulk? Why does the Bertram Newton Elite deem it necessary for card scheme plant operators to have an in-depth knowledge of CDM regs? An awareness is sufficient, but not intensive swathes of underpinning knowledge on subjects that are best suited to health and safety officers. I hear some training providers of both schemes are charging £200 for a blue-carded operator to renew his ticket, which is outrageous profiteering. You hit the nail on the head regarding the money priorities of some training providers. Chris Mark's response, can't disagree with any of that. Graham Williams, who was the person, a dyslexic person who watches our show, who first got in touch, he actually prompted this part of the discussion. He agrees. And he goes on to say, now, I will state for the record, because Graham is very seriously dyslexic, he really, really struggles with reading and writing. So he actually uses a system that turns text into speech, both to read whatever it is that we're putting online, but he then uses the reverse of that. So he speaks and it's turned into text. So some of this is not the easiest to understand, but I'll give it a go. Graham Williams says, my tickets ran out last December. Until I renew them, I can't work. So I'm sitting at home, twiddling my thumbs. Mark Anthony, bless his cotton socks, managed to help me through. Mick Norton also managed to help me, and soon hopefully I'll get them back. What a waste of time. Once you lose your ticket, you can't actually work again in this industry. It's a joke. If you have a car license, that's a different thing. You can drive until you're 70. It's a shame what people have to go through. No wonder there is a lot of suicide. This is a waste of the industry and a loss of experience for men and for women. Jim Turner, another of the regulars on the Breakfast Show, says, I don't mind jumping through their hoops when I want to gain a new category. My gripe is having to keep reapplying for what I've had for the last 20 odd years. And he too makes the point about driving qualifications. He says someone who passed their driving test in an Austin 7 in the 50s still has a current UK driving licence and could theoretically go out and buy a modern day supercar and drive on UK roads. So why keep changing our plant tickets and putting obstacles in the way of an industry that desperately needs more people? If they want a better standard of operator or worker, all they need to do is start a UK-wide weekly drug and alcohol test, and the safety standard of work would rise overnight. We'll come back to the subject of drugs and alcohol, I'm sure, in a future episode. Andy Hayton says, CITB is a legalised scam. The tests and testers are a joke. I can get a car today sat on my sofa, Triple STS, SMSTS, no problem. As long as they keep scamming people, the industry will always be full of amateurs and cowboys. Jackie Brown joined the conversation. Jackie Brown, who is a director at JB Training Enterprises, says, CSCS do not recognise RPL on MVQs. We have a client who will lose his qualification of erecting and dismantling of portable buildings in December 2024, as gained through Accreditation A. We carried out an NVQ L2 in modular building. Client had previously passed an NVQ, thus we RPL'd units 641 and 642, widely accepted across awarding bodies and other card schemes. Why would we charge for another full NVQ covering two of the same units again? 25 credits achieved and units of credit certificate comes in. CSCS refused to recognise qualification as level 2 on certificate, but not level 2 is on the certificate, but not the letters NVQ. Our client did as requested to upskill his qualifications to keep him and his business current, only for CSCS to refuse and insist he does a full NVQ again, albeit he already holds level 2 in carpentry and joinery also. Across construction, we hear of a shortage of qualified workforce, and yet here is a card scheme disadvantaging individuals and companies upskilling their workforce under duress with the removal of Accreditation A. Called CSCS, asked about their policy on RPL, and response was, we do not recognise it. Asked about their appeals procedure, they haven't got one. They point you to a not for fit for purpose, contact us. Surely a backward response, which itself generated a bunch of replies. Mick Norton responded, if CSCS have denied the qualification because the term MVQ was not specifically mentioned on earlier certification, it's outrageous. Equally unbelievable is that they, the CSCS, are stating they do not accept accreditation of prior learning. Who did you speak to at CSCS? Can I have your permission to challenge the head of CSCS with your post? Jackie Brown says, yes, please. Also, I have proof on my phone challenging their chat group. Took about 15 minutes to come back to. Also said I was going to report them to Ofsted. Mick Norton then inquires who Jackie Brown spoke to, and she says, I spoke to a lady on the phone Monday the 3rd of July 2023 at 2:15. She agreed with a man that I spoke to the week before who told me about the letters MVQ missing from the unit certificate. Thus, he needed to redo his MVQ to get the front certificate qualification on it, and MVQ again for both. Again, both said CSCS do not recognise RPL. I asked the lady on Monday for their appeals procedure, directed me to an area that certainly wasn't an appeals site. Whilst on their site, CSCS support chat came back at 2:43, asked them the same question. Brent came back and said, sorry, no, reiterated my question. As they are an awarding body, he came back and said, not that I know of, sorry. This is exactly what he typed back. Mick Norton has asked for Jackie Brown to clarify what is RPL. In my day, it was APL, Accreditation of Prior Learning. Jackie Brown says, apparently it is recognised prior learning. This was changed 5 to 6 years ago. Chris Monks then responded, and I know we've mentioned Chris earlier in this show. It's also been very interesting to see how many CPCS testers at the more mature end of the scale have decided they will pack in altogether or just to stick to NPAWS. I have my theory of why this might be happening, other than age and cost. And we're going to end this show with a comment from a guy called Tim Gosden, who is an operator, 360-degree excavator operator. And this, I think, pretty much sums up the feelings of most. It's a shame what's happened to the site. Once a great, happy, pleasurable way of life where you took your kids and they would learn off a time-served father. Instead, now you learn off an 18-year-old black hat, as he's got every card under the sun with decades of experience behind him. But time stops for no man, and life moves on, as they say. There is your point. Once great and happy, pleasurable way of life on site, not so much anymore. And I think he makes another good point. You used to take your children onto those sites, show them the ropes, get them to make the tea on a Saturday morning, and that's how they got their initial experience and their initial expertise. And I said this on the Breakfast show this morning. There is an entire generation of operators out there who will have been, came out of school and they got an opportunity to drive a site dumper. Turned out they quite liked it and they were pretty good at it. So they got an opportunity to drive a mini excavator. They were pretty good at that as well. And so they moved on up to a 360-degree excavator where they proved their worth again. Having proved their worth on those machines, they decided, I'd like to drive a dozer. It's complicated, but I think I'm up to it. Turns out they were really, really good at operating a dozer. They've got cards for a site dumper, for a mini excavator, a skid steer, a 360 excavator, and a dozer. And now, because of the change in regulations, some, if not all of those cards will not qualify anymore, and those people could be rendered unemployed as a result of a shift on the goalposts. Now, that's the way this show is going to work in the future. I'm going to remove that. If you've got any comments on any of that, please leave them in the comment section below. We will be doing more of these. In fact, I'm hoping to actually record another one of these today. But let us know what you like about what you hate about the new show format, but also let us have your thoughts on the abolition of grandfather rights under CSCS. One of my biggest concerns with this is having written about it and having broadcast about it previously, the number of people that are genuinely surprised that this is something that's happening and it could affect their livelihood, and they are genuinely surprised. And bearing in mind where this conversation started, with dyslexia and people with reading and writing difficulties, there is already a disparity. The CSCS will claim that there are 70,000 people that could be affected by the loss of grandfather rights. Others suggest it could be as many as 200,000. We've already seen people being genuinely surprised that this change that will directly impact their ability to work, they haven't had it communicated to them. But how is it being communicated, if at all? If they are sending letters to dyslexic people and are expecting them to fully grasp the basics of what this means to them, and if they're then expecting those dyslexic people to then go online to apply to update their cards, this is going to be a major issue, and it's going to be a major issue in an industry that is already in the midst of a major skill shortage. So please let me have your comments on any or all of that. You can find that link over on LinkedIn. The conversation remains ongoing. And if you'd like to start a completely new thread, please do so in the chat below. I will post the links to my previous video and also the one featuring Ollie Guns as well. So go and take a look at those. Knowledge is power. And if you are likely to be impacted, you probably need to listen to a few of those videos, because they may just give you the information that you need. Until next time, have a great day. All the best.